Have you ever been judged for something you did in the past and realized that no matter how much you've changed, no matter how much time has passed, people still only see that one mistake? Grace Holloway had that moment on a Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon, in the dairy aisle of Millbrook Market, holding a gallon of milk she was about to buy. It was an ordinary day, the kind of day normal people have without a second thought. But Grace wasn't a normal person. Not in the eyes of the town. Grace was that woman, the one who had burned down her ex-boyfriend's house 6 years ago, the one who had gone to prison, the one who, even after serving her full sentence, even after doing everything right since she returned, still carried the mark of a criminal on her forehead, like an invisible tattoo that everyone could see. She was deciding between whole and skim milk, a mundane decision that should have been the biggest concern of the day when she heard sirens. It wasn't unusual. Millbrook was a small town, but things happened. Ambulances, police cars, fire alarms occasionally. Grace didn't think much. She just grabbed the whole milk and turned to go to the checkout. And that's when she saw it. She saw a reflection in the large window at the front of the store. A reflection of a crowd forming outside on the sidewalk. 10, 15, maybe 20 people. And all of them were looking inside, looking at her, through the glass, as if she were an animal in a zoo. Or worse, as if she were a monster in a cage that could escape at any moment. Grace knew those looks. She'd seen them on the faces of her neighbors when she returned to town 18 months ago. She'd seen them when she entered a store or walked down the street. Fear, anger, distrust, and something else, something almost worse than hate. It was certainty. Certainty that she was evil, that she would always be evil, that no matter what she did, she would never be anything more than the crime she had committed. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt the weight of judgmental looks before you even know her? Stay with me until the end. Because what happened next in that market was the moment when Grace's life, a small, fragile life she had rebuilt brick by brick, began to crumble again. Mr. Patterson, the market owner, man in his 60s who had always been polite but distant with Grace, approached, walking quickly, his expression tense. "Grace," he said, his voice low but firm, the tone he used when he didn't want to cause a scene but needed something to happen immediately. "I think you'd better go. Now." Grace felt her stomach clench. Why? What happened? She looked again at the crowd outside. Now, there were more. Maybe 30 people. And some were pointing. Not discreetly, openly, as if she were guilty of something. But guilty of what? She hadn't done anything. Nothing. She'd gone to work at the laundromat. She'd come straight to the market. She'd lived an absolutely ordinary day. "Fire," Mr. Patterson said, and the word fell like a brick, at the Brennan's house. A few hours ago, Grace felt her breath catch. Brennan, that name that haunted her. Because Sarah Brennan was Tyler Brennan's sister. Tyler, Grace's ex-boyfriend, the man who had abused her for 18 months. The man whose house Grace had burned down in an act of rage and despair that sent her to prison for 3 years. And Sarah had been Grace's nightmare since she returned. Sarah, who led campaigns to keep criminals out of the neighborhood. Sarah, who posted about Grace on social media. Sarah, who made sure no one forgot what Grace had done. Sarah Brennan, Mr. Patterson continued, hesitating as if the next word were difficult to say. Sarah is dead. The world stopped. Sound faded. Grace heard no more sirens. No murmur of the crowd outside. She only heard her own heart beating. Because she knew. She knew exactly what was happening. She knew why the crowd was staring at her. She knew why Mr. Patterson wanted her to leave. "And everyone knows you, and she had a history," he added, unnecessarily, as if Grace needed an explanation. As if she didn't perfectly understand what was being implied. No, not implied. Accused. She was being accused again, without trial, without investigation, without evidence. Just instantly condemned by who she used to be. for a crime she had committed 6 years ago. As if the past defined the present. As if change were impossible. As if redemption were a lie society tells but never truly believes. Grace felt blood drain from her face. Her legs grew weak. And for a moment, a terrible and tempting moment, she thought of simply giving up. Of accepting what the town had already decided. Because fighting when no one believes is exhausting, soul-crushing. But then she remembered. She remembered 18 months of fighting to rebuild. She remembered weekly anger management meetings where she learned to process emotions without destroying. She remembered each day waking up and choosing to do things differently, to do better. And something inside her, something stubborn and perhaps foolish but real, said, "No, not this time. I will not accept accusation without a fight." "I didn't do it," she told Mr. Patterson, her voice firmer than she felt. "It doesn't matter what the town thinks. It doesn't matter my history with Sarah. I didn't do it." Mr. Patterson looked at her with something that could have been pity. "Grace, I'm not saying you did it. I'm saying you need to go. Because the crowd out there, they believe you did it. And safety isn't something I can guarantee if you stay." It was a warning, not a threat from him, but an acknowledgement of a dangerous reality. The crowd that had decided her guilty could easily become a mob. And Grace, a woman alone, without allies, without defenders, would be an easy target. She dropped milk on the floor, didn't even think, just let it fall, and walked to the back door, the exit employees used. The exit that wouldn't force her to pass through the crowd. And as she walked, as she escaped down the alley like a fugitive even though she hadn't done anything, Grace realized a brutal truth. Punishment can be served. Debt can be paid. But in a small town, in a community that decides who you are based on your worst moment, you're never truly free. And that realization, that crushing weight of injustice, was about to be tested in ways Grace never imagined. Because there was one person in town who didn't believe in automatic condemnation. One person who had seen Grace for the past 18 months. She had witnessed real change, and she was about to do something that could cost her distinction, reputation, and career. Stand by her side. That person was Sheriff Ethan Cross, and Ethan had his own history with judgment and second chances. He had seen what happens when society decides someone doesn't deserve redemption. He had lost his sister too. Domestic violence because no one believed her when she tried to ask for help. Because her ex-husband was a good man and she was dramatic. And when she finally tried to leave him, when she finally mustered the courage, he killed her. 2 days before a restraining order that Ethan had helped her file was to be prosecuted. So Ethan understood something the rest of the city didn't. That people can change, that context matters, and that judging someone solely based on their worst moment is denying them the basic humanity everyone deserves. When Ethan heard about the fire at the Brennan house, when he heard that Sarah was dead, the first thing he did was go to the scene. Firefighters were still putting out the last flames. A fire investigator was already there, man named Ron Martinez, whom Ethan had known for years. "What do we have?" Ethan asked. Ron looked at him with an expression Ethan immediately recognized. It was the look of someone who had already decided on the answer. Before asking the question, accelerator was used. Definitely intentional. Burn pattern suggests gasoline spilled in multiple spots. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Suspects? Ethan asked, though instinct already told him where this was going. "Well," Ron said, wiping soot from his hands. "Grace Holloway lives 3 blocks from here, and she has a history, a specific one, of doing exactly this." "History from 6 years ago," Ethan corrected, his voice firmer than he intended. "She served her time. She's been out for 18 months without a single incident. Once an arsonist, always an arsonist," Ron said with a shrug, as if it were an established fact. As if people couldn't change. As if Grace hadn't spent 3 years in prison precisely to pay for a crime. And she and Sarah had a history. Sarah was campaigning to get Grace out of town. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows a lot of things that aren't true, Ethan said. But Ron had already turned around, already gone. Back to work, cataloging evidence that Ethan knew would be used to build a case against Grace before a real investigation took place. If something like this has ever happened to you, if you've ever been judged before you had a chance to explain, share in the comments. Because that feeling of being condemned without a fair trial is one of the loneliest experiences there is. Ethan knew he needed to act fast. Because in a small town, rumors spread faster than wildfire, and the narrative was already being written. Grace Holloway, an ex-convict, killed Sarah Brennan in revenge. Simple, neat, and completely without nuance. He went straight to Grace's apartment, a small space above a hardware store on Main Street. He climbed narrow stairs and knocked on the door. It took a moment before Grace opened it, and when she did, Ethan immediately saw that she already knew. Her eyes were red, she had been crying, her face was pale, and her posture was that of someone expecting a blow, expecting to be arrested, expecting the worst scenario imaginable to unfold. "Sheriff Cross," she said, her voice careful, formal, as if she were a foreigner, speaking authoritatively in a language she barely knew. "Can I help you? I need to ask you some questions. About last night? About the fire," Grace said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Grace opened the door wider, a gesture of resignation. "You can come in, but the answer will disappoint. I was here, alone. No alibi, no witnesses, no proof that I wasn't out there, destroying life again." There was bitterness in her voice, but also exhaustion. Exhaustion of someone who had fought so hard to prove she had changed, only to see the city decide that effort didn't matter. Ethan entered. The apartment was sad. There was no other word. Minimal furniture, empty walls, no personal decoration. It was like the space of someone who didn't expect to stay, or someone who had learned not to cling because everything could be taken away. "Were you here between 10 and midnight?" "Yes, watching TV, alone, like every night." "What did you watch?" "It was a test, a small one, but a test. Reruns of Law and Order, 2 episodes. And then local news at 11. Ethan believed her, not because he had proof, but because the answer was specific, casual, unrehearsed. "Did you hear about Sarah?" "Yes, Mr. Patterson told me, at the market, where the crowd was looking at me like a murderer." Grace sat on a worn sofa. "And I know what the town thinks. That I did it. That I got revenge on her for the campaign she waged against me, for making life impossible." She looked directly at Ethan, and there was something in her eyes, something Ethan recognized from his own sister in the last days before she died. It was the look of someone tired of fighting, tired of not being believed. "But I didn't, Sheriff. I've changed. I work every day. I go to meetings. I follow every rule of my parole. I don't drink. I don't go out. I just try to survive day by day. And Sarah," her voice broke. "Sarah hated me. And she had the right. I burned down her brother's house. I understand anger, but I didn't hurt her. I wouldn't do that, no matter how hard it made life." If this part resonated with you, if you felt Grace's frustration trying to prove her innocence when no one wants to listen, leave a like. It helps me know you're feeling this with me. "I believe you," Ethan said, and he saw pure shock on Grace's face, as if he had said something impossible. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you believe me when no one else does? When the evidence, my past, my history with Sarah, the fact that I live 3 blocks away, all points to me." "Because I've seen you," Ethan said, sitting down in a chair across the street. "For the last 18 months. Not officially, but as sheriff, I pay attention. And I've seen how you live. I've seen you go to work every day. I've seen you avoid trouble. I've seen you rebuild. And if you were going to do that, if you really wanted revenge on Sarah, you wouldn't use your old methods. That would be stupid. And you're not stupid." Grace looked at him as if she were seeing him for the first time. No one ever noticed. No one saw effort. They only saw the past. I saw, Ethan said simply. And I'll prove you didn't. But you need to trust me. Can you do that? Grace hesitated. Because trusting someone when you've been betrayed by the entire system isn't easy. When every institution has failed, when every person has judged you. Trusting the sheriff, the authority figure who condemned her the first time, seemed impossible. But looking at Ethan, seeing sincerity in his eyes, Grace made a decision that would change everything. Yes, she said, I can try. If you want to see more stories like this, stories about people fighting for a second chance against a system that has already decided they don't deserve it, subscribe to the channel. I bring these stories every week because they matter. And Ethan, leaving that apartment with the promise he made, knew he had just crossed a line. He had just put his badge on the line for a woman the entire city had decided was guilty. But something about Grace, her quiet determination, the way she refused to give up, even when it would be easiest, reminded him why he had become a police officer in the first place. Not to serve the mob, but to serve justice. Real justice. Justice that gave everyone, even those with a past, a chance to prove their innocence before conviction. And as Ethan drove back to the precinct, preparing for the war he knew was coming, one thing was clear. Grace Holloway wasn't going to face this alone. Not this time. Because for the first time in 6 years, someone was on her side. And that someone had a badge and the determination to use it to protect, not to persecute. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding who Grace Holloway really was, not the monster the town saw, but the person she had become, to understand why the accusation was so devastating, and why her fight for redemption was the loneliest battle anyone could face. Grace was 34 years old, and of those 34 years, 3 were spent behind bars at the Riverside Women's Correctional Facility, 2 hours from Millbrook. 3 years for arson. 3 years paying for nights where anger and despair had consumed her so completely that she destroyed her ex-boyfriend's house with a gallon of gasoline and matches. The house had burned to the foundations. Tyler wasn't there. He had left, as he always did after beating her, to a bar where he would drink and laugh with friends as if nothing had happened. Nobody died. That was the fact Grace repeated to herself on nights when the guilt weighed too heavily. Nobody died. It could have happened. If Tyler had been home. If neighbors hadn't seen smoke and called the fire department quickly enough to stop the fire from spreading. But nobody died. Only property was destroyed. Only Grace's life was destroyed, too. Because although the prosecution had heard about abusing out 18 months of Tyler beating her, controlling every aspect of her life, isolating her from friends and family, context didn't excuse the action. A crime was a crime. And Grace, with a history of calling the police 5 times just to have Tyler convince them it was a misunderstanding, didn't have enough credibility for victim of abuse defense to fully work. Grace's transformation from victim to criminal in the eyes of the system was swift and brutal. Because even when her lawyer presented photos of bruises, hospital records of a fractured rib, testimony from a neighbor who had heard screams, the jury saw a woman who had deliberately destroyed property, who had planned it, bought gasoline hours before, who had executed it, waited for Tyler to leave, and who had shown no immediate remorse, because when arrested, the first thing she said was he deserved it. So, 3 years. It could have been more. It could have been less, but it was 3 years. And Grace served every day, every hour, learning that justice doesn't always mean fair, that victims can become perpetrators, and that society doesn't have much patience for nuance. Prison was education, not the kind the system promises, rehabilitation and reintegration, but education about who you become when everything is taken away. When every choice is made for you. When privacy is a luxury and dignity is something you fight to maintain. Grace learned to be quiet, to not make waves, to follow every rule because even the smallest infraction could add time. She worked in the kitchen. She attended mandatory anger management classes, where a therapist, a woman named Dr. Linda Chen, who was one of the few people genuinely trying to help, taught her techniques for processing emotions without self-destruction. Anger isn't the enemy, Dr. Chen would say. It's a sign that something is wrong, but what you do with anger, that defines who you are. The impact of those sessions was profound, because for the first time, Grace began to understand her own anger. Not the anger she had felt that night when she burned down Tyler's house, but the anger she had carried for years. Anger at not being believed when she asked for help. Anger at a system that told her to leave when she had nowhere to go. Anger at being seen as dramatic when she was literally fighting to survive. And Dr. Chen didn't judge that anger. It only helped Grace find ways to channel it that weren't destructive. Grace left prison after 3 years with something she didn't have when she went in: self-understanding, and a determination to never again let anger control her actions. To prove to herself, if not to anyone else, that she could change. What crime he committed didn't define the totality of who he was. But returning to Millbrook was immediately difficult, because Grace had nowhere else to go. Parents had died in a car accident when she was 22. She had no siblings. Friends she had before Tyler isolated her had moved on, and Tyler had rebuilt. New house, new girlfriend. Life that continued as if 18 months of abuse had never happened. Grace didn't want to see him, didn't want to be in the same city, but she didn't have the resources to go anywhere else, so she went back. She found a tiny apartment that the landlord, an older man who needed rent and didn't ask many questions, rented to her. She found work at a laundromat, the only place that would hire someone with a criminal record. And she began to rebuild her life brick by brick. The rebuilding journey was lonelier than Grace had imagined. She woke up at 5:30 every morning. She took the bus at 6:15 to the laundromat on the other side of town. She worked from 7 o'clock to 3 o'clock, operating industrial machines that cleaned hotel sheets, restaurant uniforms, and gym towels. The work was monotonous, repetitive, but it was also honest, and there was something almost meditative about the routine. Folding, sorting, washing, drying, repeating. No complication, no judgment, just work. At 3 o'clock, she took the bus back. She stopped at the market if she needed anything, always quickly, always avoiding conversation. Because conversation in Millbrook meant stares. It meant whispers. It meant being reminded that no matter how much time passed, she would always be that woman. And then home. An apartment where she spent nights alone, no cable TV too expensive, so just basic channels, reruns of old programs, news that kept her minimally connected to the world, and books. Grace read a lot. Mostly novels, stories about people who started over, who found love despite complicated pasts. Escapism that allowed her, for a few hours, to forget her own life. Tuesdays were anger management meetings. A small group that met in a church basement. 6 people, lol, dealing with their own demons. The facilitator was a man named Robert who had his own history of violence and now dedicated his life to helping others. Redemption is possible, he would say, but it's work. Every day. And society doesn't make it easy. It didn't, indeed. The revelation of just how difficult society was making things came in pieces. Small rejections that piled up. Grace had tried volunteering at an animal shelter. She loved animals. She thought maybe she could help. The manager had smiled politely. "Thank you for your interest, but we don't have any openings at the moment." 2 weeks later, she saw an advertisement looking for volunteers for animal shelter. She had gone to the church where she grew up. The church where she had been baptized, where she had gone with her parents. Pastor Morrison saw her. He didn't say anything directly, but the congregation did. Whispers during the sermon, glances during coffee after the service, and a note. Someone left a note on the pew where she sat. People like you don't belong in God's house. You have stained this holy place with your presence. Grace didn't return. She tried to rent a better apartment, something with more light, maybe with a small balcony, something that felt less like a cell. The landlord saw her name on the application, did a background check, and called. "Sorry, Miss Holloway. The property has been rented to someone else." It hadn't. Grace went there a week later. The for rent sign was still there. Each rejection was small, manageable individually, but cumulatively overwhelming, because they sent a clear message. You are not welcome. You don't belong. You don't deserve a second chance. And worse than rejections from strangers was Sarah Brennan's active campaign. Sarah, Tyler's sister, who had decided to make it her personal mission to make Grace's life impossible. Posts in the city's Facebook group, "Dangerous ex-convict living in our community. We have a right to know who is among us." Online petition. "We demand that convicted, violent criminals be banned from residing in residential areas of Millbrook." It collected 200 signatures. Direct confrontations. Sarah showing up at the laundromat where Grace worked. "I just came to make it clear that we're not going to forget what you did. We're not going to let you pretend you're a different person. You burned down my brother's house. You're an arsonist. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." And Grace didn't respond. She didn't fight back. She just stood there and took it, because fighting back, engaging, defending herself, would only prove Sarah's point. It would only make Grace seem unstable, violent, exactly what the town already believed. So Grace absorbed it. She let Sarah scream. She let the campaign continue. And she continued living. She continued working. She continued going to meetings. She continued proving to herself that she was different, that she had changed. But there were moments when the weight of it all was too heavy, moments when Grace stayed awake at 3 a.m, wondering if it was worth it, if it was worth fighting for acceptance that might never come, if it was worth rebuilding her life in a city that would never forgive her, if it was worth existing in perpetual isolation, if any of it was worth it. And in those moments, Grace thought about giving up. Not dramatically. Just leave. Disappear. Start over somewhere else, where no one knew her name. Where a criminal record would be just paper in a file. No story that everyone knew. But she stayed. Because running again seemed like admitting defeat. It seemed like saying that Sarah was right. That Grace didn't deserve to be there. And something stubborn in Grace, something that had survived abuse and imprisonment and ostracism, refused to accept that. So she stayed. And she kept going. And she hoped that eventually, effort would matter. That someone would notice. That someone would see not the crime she committed, but the person she had become. She didn't know that someone already was noticing. That Sheriff Ethan Cross had seen her every step, had seen her silent rebuilding and determination not to give up. And that when the whole town turned against her again, when a new fire and a new death made her an automatic target, Ethan would be the only one who stood between her and unjust condemnation. Because unlike the rest of Millbrook, Ethan understood something crucial, that the past doesn't have to define the future. That redemption is not only possibly a basic human right, and that Grace Holloway deserved a chance to prove her innocence before being thrown back into the cage she had worked so hard to escape. Comment below, when you work every day to change, to be better, but nobody recognizes your effort. Is it still worth it, or are you just hurting yourself trying to prove something to people who will never believe you? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the way Millbrook treated Grace in the 18 months following her release wasn't just indifference or cautious distance. It was active rejection. It was systematic sabotage of every attempt she made to rebuild. And it was led by one person who turned personal grief into a public crusade: Sarah Brennan. Sarah didn't hide her hatred for Grace. She didn't feign civility. From the day Grace returned to town, Sarah had made it her mission to ensure everyone knew exactly who Grace was and what she had done. The campaign began online. The first post appeared in the Facebook group Millbrook Community Watch, 2 days after Grace returned. Warning: dangerous ex-convict, now residing in our city. Grace Holloway, convicted of arson, is living on Main Street. She burned down a house, deliberately, violently, and now she's among us. We have a right to know. We have a right to protect our families. The post included a photo of Grace, an old booking photo of her, where she stared at the camera with empty eyes and disheveled hair. The worst version of herself, frozen in a moment of greatest shame. And Sarah made sure that image was what everyone saw when they thought of Grace. Comments on the post were brutal. She shouldn't be allowed near residential properties. Why did she come back? Nobody wants her here. She should have stayed where she was. Grace's transformation from someone trying to start over to an outcast in the city was accelerated by each of Sarah's posts. And Sarah didn't stop. She created a petition. We demand that the City Council approve an ordinance prohibiting convicted violent criminals from residing in residential areas of Millbrook. She collected 243 signatures. In a city of 3,000, that was a significant number. Almost 10% of the city had signed a document saying that Grace didn't deserve to live there. The petition didn't pass, it wasn't legally viable, but the damage was done. Because now Grace knew. She knew how many people actively didn't want her. How many had taken the time to sign their names saying that her existence was a problem. But worse than the online campaign were the personal confrontations. Sarah didn't stay behind a screen. She showed up. Grace was leaving the laundromat one afternoon when she saw Sarah waiting in the parking lot, arms crossed, an expression of cold determination. "We need to talk," Sarah said. Not a request, a command. Grace had tried to pass. "We have nothing to talk about, Sarah. You burned down my brother's house. You traumatized him. And now you're here, pretending to be a victim, pretending to have changed. But you haven't changed. People like you don't change." Sarah's voice was rising. People in the parking lot began to stare. "I served my sentence," Grace said quietly. "I paid my debt." Debt? You think 3 years pays for destroying someone's life? The impact of those words, destroying someone's life, would have been funny if it weren't so painful. Because Tyler was doing well. Better than well. He had rebuilt his house with insurance money. He had a good job, a new relationship, while Grace had nothing. Less than nothing. She had prison debt. She had a job that barely paid the rent. She had an apartment that looked like a cell. But pointing that out to Sarah would be useless. Because to Sarah, Grace was a monster. And monsters don't deserve compassion. "I'll make sure everyone knows who you are," Sarah continued. "I'll make sure you never have a moment of peace in this city. Because you don't deserve peace. You deserve to remember, every day, what you did." And Sarah had kept her promise. It wasn't just online. It was in person. It was Sarah showing up at church and casually mentioning to the congregation that a convicted criminal was sitting among them. It was Sarah talking to the animal shelter manager and expressing concern about the safety of having someone with violent tendencies near vulnerable animals. It was Sarah contacting landlords when she saw Grace was looking for an apartment and warning about the risk of having a tenant with a history of arson. Every door Grace tried to open, Sarah was there to close. And there was nothing Grace could do, because Sarah wasn't doing anything illegal. She was just informing the community. She was just exercising freedom of speech. She was just ensuring that Grace's mistake would follow her for life. The revelation of just how coordinated Sarah's campaign came when Grace tried to change jobs. She'd seen an ad for a receptionist at a local doctor's office. It didn't pay much more than laundry, but it would be a better environment, more human interaction, more dignity. Grace applied. She had an interview. It went well. The doctor who interviewed her seemed impressed. "I'll call you in a few days," she said. Grace waited. She waited a week, 2 weeks. And then she received an email. We've decided to go with another candidate. Okay, normal. But then Grace saw it. She saw Sarah commenting on her own Facebook post. Good news. I managed to stop an arsonist from being hired at Dr. Martinez's office. I kept our medical community safe. She had contacted the clinic. She had warned them about Grace. And Grace had lost her opportunity. Not because she wasn't qualified. Not because she didn't do well in the interview. But because Sarah ensured that the past remained. Grace sat in her apartment that night and cried. She cried from frustration, from powerlessness, from the devastating realization that no matter how hard she worked, no matter how much she changed, Sarah would always be there, always ensuring that Millbrook never forgot, always ensuring that Grace never had a real chance, and worse, the city allowed it. Nobody told Sarah to stop. Nobody questioned whether the campaign was fair. Nobody defended Grace. Because deep down, even people who weren't actively participating in Sarah's crusade agreed on the basic premise: ex-convicts don't deserve second chances. Grace's journey through those 18 months was one of gradually dying hope. She had returned believing that if she worked hard, if she followed the rules, if she proved herself changed, eventually she would be accepted. But with each passing month, each closed door, each look of fear or disgust, each post from Sarah, hope dwindled, and Grace began to realize a bitter truth. Society talks about redemption. It talks about second chances, but it doesn't really believe. Not when it's convenient not to believe. Not when there's someone like Sarah keeping the flame of indignation burning. Not when it's easier to keep someone in the criminal box than to acknowledge their complicated humanity. And then came the small acts of cruelty that weren't Sarah's alone, but those of the city in general. Grace was at the post office sending a bill when, as a child, she couldn't have been more than 6. She pointed at her. Mommy, is that the mean woman? Her mother quickly pulled the child away. Don't point. It's not polite, but she didn't correct her either. She didn't say she's not mean. She just pushed the child away as if Grace were a danger. Grace was buying groceries when a man in line behind her said loudly enough for her to hear, "They should have a separate section for criminals." I don't feel safe shopping next to her. The manager said nothing. He just avoided eye contact with Grace. Grace was walking home when a group of teenagers passed by. One shouted, "Hey, crazy lady, going to burn something else today?" Others laughed, as if her trauma was a joke, as if the crime she had committed in a moment of desperation after months of abuse was entertainment. Each small incident, individually insignificant, but cumulatively overwhelming, because they sent a message Grace couldn't escape. You are not welcome, you don't belong, and nothing you do will change that. And the most painful truth, Grace began to believe it. She began to internalize it. She began to think that maybe the city was right. Maybe she didn't deserve a second chance. Maybe the mistake she made was too big to forgive. Maybe she should just give up. She was closer to giving up than anyone knew on the morning of the fire. She had woken up at 3 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, thinking, what's the point? A job I hate, an apartment that feels like a prison, no friends, no family, no hope of things getting better. Just day-to-day existence, where the best-case scenario is being ignored. Why go on? She had no good answer. Just stubbornness. Just a refusal to give Sarah the satisfaction of seeing her give up. And then Sarah died. And Grace, who had spent 18 months being the target of Sarah's relentless campaign, who had every reason in the world to hate Sarah, was instantly accused of killing her. No investigation, no evidence, just assumption based on the past. And Grace realized it didn't matter. It didn't matter that she had changed. It didn't matter that she had followed every rule. It didn't matter that he had absorbed verbal abuse and social rejection without retaliating. Because the moment something bad happened, the city didn't ask who did it. It asked, how do we prove Grace did it? It was condemnation based not on action but on identity. And it was exactly the kind of injustice the judicial system was supposed to exist to prevent. But the system was made of people, and the people of Millbrook had already decided who Grace was. And no amount of change would alter that decision. Except there was one person who had seen Grace for the past 18 months, who had witnessed silent rebuilding, who understood the difference between justice and revenge, and who was about to put badge and career on the line to prove that Grace deserved more than the automatic condemnation the city was so eager to hand out. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the reason Ethan Cross didn't automatically accept Grace's guilt wasn't just professional instinct. It was personal history. It was a memory of being present 6 years ago when Grace was arrested. It was testifying at her trial. And it was carrying, ever since, a persistent discomfort about how the case had been handled. Ethan was 41 years old, 20 years in law enforcement. And in those 20 years, he had seen a lot. He had seen guilty and innocent people. He had seen systems work and fail. But Grace Holloway's case had stayed with him in a way that few others have, because it had been one of his first significant cases as a newly promoted deputy. He remembered the night. The call had come in at 11:23 p.m. Structural fire. Residence on Oak Street. Possible arson. Ethan had answered. He arrived to find Tyler Brennan's house engulfed in flames. Firefighters struggling to contain the fire, and Tyler outside, screaming. Not because of property loss, but that crazy bitch burned my house down. Grace. It was her. I saw her leaving. Ethan had found Grace 2 blocks away, sitting on the curb, clothes smelling of gasoline, hands trembling, eyes empty. When Ethan approached, she didn't run. She didn't resist. She just looked up and said, "I did. I burned it. He deserved it." Clear admission. Case open and closed. Except it wasn't, because when Ethan took Grace to the police station, when he began the formal interview, he saw bruises on her wrist, fresh, finger-shaped, as if someone had gripped too hard. The transformation in Ethan's understanding of the case began there. Where did these bruises come from? Tyler, tonight, before I did what I did, he hurt you. Grace had laughed, not humor, bitterness. He always hurts me, for months, but nobody believes me, because Tyler is a good guy, works hard, goes to church, and nobody. You called the police. 5 times. 5 times I reported it, and each time, you came. And each time, Tyler convinced me it was a misunderstanding, that I was dramatic, that I fell, that I'm clumsy. And you believed him, not me. And Ethan, looking at records later, saw that it was true. 5 home calls over 18 months, all filed away, all with notes like no visible signs of aggression, or both parties calm upon arrival, or possible exaggeration on the part of the complainant. The system had failed Grace, repeatedly, and so Grace had taken justice into her own hands, in the most destructive way possible. Ethan had testified at the trial, not for the defense, he wasn't allowed, but for the prosecution, confirming that Grace had confessed, that she had admitted to arson. And while he testified, while he saw Grace sitting there small, broken, clearly traumatized, he saw the defense attorney try to present context, try to show photos of old bruises, try to call a neighbor who had heard screams, try to build a case that Grace was a victim defending herself in the only desperate way she knew how. But the prosecutor had effectively countered. Self-defense requires immediate threat. Ms. Holloway waited for Tyler to leave, bought gasoline, planned and executed an act of deliberate destruction. That's not self-defense, it's revenge. The impact of seeing Grace convicted 3 years, it could have been more, had left Ethan with a feeling that justice hadn't been fully served. Not because Grace didn't deserve consequences, but because Tyler deserved them too. He deserved to answer for months of abuse, But he didn't. Because Grace didn't have enough evidence. Because the system that should have protected her had repeatedly failed. And then when she reacted, she was punished for reacting. But the original abuser went unpunished. It was an injustice Ethan couldn't reconcile. So when Grace returned to Millbrook 18 months ago, Ethan paid attention. Unofficially. Not stalking. Just conscience. As sheriff, he naturally knew when ex-convicts returned to the community. It was part of the job. But with Grace, it was more than professional. It was personal. Because I wanted to see, had she really changed? Or was a return to prison inevitable? In the first few months, Ethan saw Grace struggling. He saw her get a job at the laundromat. He saw her walking to work every day, same route, same time. He saw her going to anger management meetings at church. He knew the schedule because Robert, the facilitator, had mentioned it in casual conversation. He saw her living an extremely structured life. No detours, no problems. And when Sarah's campaign began, when posts appeared online and the petitions circulated, Ethan saw Grace, absorbing, not fighting back, not making a scene, just continuing, head down, working, existing. And Ethan recognized that as strength, as real change. Because the old Grace, the one who burned down the house, would have exploded, would have confronted Sarah, would have let anger control her. But the new Grace, she had learned self-control she didn't have before. The revelation of how profound Grace's change came at a specific moment that Ethan witnessed by chance. 3 months after her return, Ethan was in a diner getting coffee when he saw Grace walk in. She had gone to the counter, ordered coffee to go. And while she waited, Tyler Brennan walked in, ex-boyfriend, abuser, man whose house she had burned down. Their first encounter since prison. The atmosphere changed. Immediately, other customers noticed. They tensed, expecting an explosion. Tyler saw Grace and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a cruel smile. Grace, what a surprise. His voice loud enough for everyone to hear. How's prison? Oh wait, you got out. You probably should have stayed there. Grace didn't answer. She just stood there, waiting for coffee. Nothing to say. Tyler continued. You used to have so much to say, always yelling, always complaining, always being dramatic. He moved closer, invading her space. But I guess prison taught you a lesson, huh? Taught you to be quiet. And Ethan, watching from a booth in the back, saw Grace tremble, saw her hands clench into fists, saw every muscle tense. And he knew she was fighting anger, the urge to retaliate. Years of trauma being triggered by Tyler's presence. But she didn't retaliate. She didn't yell. She didn't make a scene. She just grabbed coffee when the barista delivered it and left, without a word, without looking back. And Tyler, disappointed that he hadn't gotten a reaction, laughed. Pathetic, he murmured. But Ethan didn't see pathetic. He saw trembling control. He saw willpower that led to real work. He saw change. Ethan's journey from observer to eventual protector of Grace was marked by those moments. By seeing her tested repeatedly and choosing not to escalate. By seeing Sarah's campaign intensify and Grace not retaliating. By seeing the entire town, Judge and Grace continuing to prove her worth through actions, not words. And then the fire happened. And Sarah died. And instantly, reflexively, the town pointed to Grace. Ethan was on the scene when fire investigator Ron Martinez made a preliminary assessment. Accelerant definitely used. Burn pattern consistent with gasoline spilled in multiple spots. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Suspects? Ethan asked, though instinct already knew the answer. Grace Holloway, Ron said without hesitation. Lives 3 blocks from here, has a history. Specific. She burned houses before. Why not again? History from 6 years ago, Ethan corrected, his voice firmer than he intended. She served her time. She's been out for 18 months without a single incident. Once an arsonist, always an arsonist, Ron said with a shrug. and she and Sarah had a history. Everyone knows about Sarah's campaign against Grace. Motive and method. Classic case. Classic case based on assumption and prejudice, Ethan said. Not evidence. Ron looked at him with a curious expression. You defending her, Sheriff? I'm defending proper investigation before mob conviction. There's a difference. And there was. Because Ethan had seen 18 months of Grace proving change. He had seen her absorb Sarah's abuse without retaliation. He had seen her meet Tyler and walk away instead of confronting him. And intuitively, fundamentally, Ethan didn't believe that Grace, even with motive, even with history, would have reversed. Not after such hard work. But belief wasn't enough. The city had already decided. A mob was already gathering. And the public prosecutor was already talking about immediate arrest. Ethan needed more than instinct. He needed facts. He needed a real investigation. So he went to Grace's apartment. Not to arrest her. To listen. To see her reaction. To confirm what his instinct already told him. That Grace hadn't done it. And when Grace opened the door with eyes red from crying, when she admitted she had no alibi but insisted on her innocence, with a voice tired of not being believed, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. He decided to believe, not blindly, but based on 18 months of observation, based on knowledge of who Grace had become. And he decided that if no one else would defend her, if no one else would give her a chance to prove her innocence before conviction, he would. Even if it cost him his badge. Even if it cost him his career. Because real justice, not mob justice, but true justice demanded it. Comment below. When you see someone genuinely working to make a change, and then a crisis hits, and everyone else gets worse, do you defend them based on their past, or on the present they've built? Now I want to delve even deeper into this, because the moment Ethan said, "I believe you," wasn't just a statement of support. It was a line being crossed. It was Sheriff putting personal judgment above public pressure. And it was, for Grace, the first time in 6 years that someone with real authority validated that she was more than her worst moment. When Ethan left Grace's apartment that afternoon, he knew he had just made a commitment he couldn't back down from. He had said he believed her, and now he had to prove it. Not just to Grace, but to the city that had already decided her guilt. It wouldn't be easy, because evidence, or what seemed like evidence, was piling up against Grace. The next day, a forensic technician found an empty gasoline can in a trash can 2 blocks from Grace's apartment. Partial fingerprints were on the can. Not clear enough for a definitive positive identification, but consistent with Grace's patterns according to preliminary analysis. The district attorney, a man named James Whitmore, who had a reputation for being tough on crime, immediately wanted to arrest her. We have motive, we have method, we have opportunity, and now we have physical evidence connecting her to the scene. He was in Ethan's office, arguing intensely, making it clear that he saw the case as an easy political victory. We need to arrest her. Now, before she flees or destroys more evidence. Evidence is circumstantial, Ethan argued. Partial fingerprints aren't definitive, and a gasoline can in a public trash can doesn't prove Grace put it there. Whitmore's expression shifted from professional to personal. You're defending her. Why? She's a convicted ex-convict. An arsonist. And now another person is dead in a fire that has the exact same signature as her previous crime. Or, Ethan said, someone is using her history to frame her. Someone who knows that city would instantly believe Grace is guilty. Are you suggesting a conspiracy? For what purpose? Who benefits? I don't know yet, but I will find out. And until I have a solid case, not just circumstantial evidence, I'm not going to arrest an innocent woman just to satisfy the mob. She's not innocent, Whitmore said. She burned down houses before. That makes her suspect number 1. 6 years ago. And she paid for that crime. She can't keep paying forever. But Whitmore wasn't convinced. And the pressure wasn't just coming from him. It was coming from the whole city. The Brennan family demanded justice. Sarah's mother, Margaret Brennan, woman in her 60s, who had lost her daughter in a horrific way, made a public statement. Everyone knows who did this. Grace Holloway. She killed my Sarah, and if the police don't act, we will. It was a thinly veiled threat, and Ethan knew that vigilantism was a real possibility. So he did something he knew would create more problems. He went to Grace and told her she couldn't stay in her apartment. It's not safe. The pressure is mounting. And if I can't guarantee adequate protection, then where do I go? Grace asked, her voice breaking. I have no one. Nowhere. Ethan hesitated, because he knew his next words would cross professional lines. Come with me, to my house, temporarily, until we find a safer solution. The impact of that offer on Grace was visible. You can't do this. You're sheriff. It'll look like it'll look like I'm protecting a civilian in danger. Ethan interrupted. Which is my job. But I'm a suspect. You're a person of interest. You haven't been formally charged. And until you are, if you have rights, including the right to safety. But they both knew it wasn't just about rights. It was about Ethan making a choice. A choice to put Grace's protection above appearances, above politics, above career. Grace went that night. She packed a small bag with clothes. She followed Ethan to his house, a modest house in the suburbs of Millbrook. 2 bedrooms, small yard. Nothing fancy but clean and comfortable. The guest room is yours, Ethan said, showing her a small room with a single bed and a dresser. Lock the door if you want, but you're safe here. I promise. The journey that first night was strange for both of them. Grace couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling of the unfamiliar room, processing the fact that Sheriff, the man who had testified against her 6 years ago, was now protecting her from her own town. It was such a complete reversal that she couldn't process it. And Ethan, in his own room on the other side of the house, also stayed awake, because he knew that in the morning, when word got around, and word always got around in a small town, there would be hell to pay. And he was right. The next morning, Captain Thomas Riley Fawn's superior, a man who had worked with him for 15 years, peered at the door. Furious. What the hell are you thinking? You're harboring a prime murder suspect. He didn't wait to be invited in. He just barged in. I'm protecting a civilian from potential vigilante violence, Ethan said calmly. She's not a civilian. She's a suspect. And you compromised the entire investigation by bringing her to your house. Your house, Ethan. The investigation is compromised if we allow a suspect to be hurt or killed before a proper trial, Ethan countered. And threats were made. Real, credible. For a grieving family, you expected them to stay calm. I expect the justice system to protect suspects, just as it protects victims, until guilt is proven. The captain looked at Ethan with a mixture of frustration and something else. Disappointment. You're throwing your career away. For her, for an ex-convict who's probably guilty, or innocent being framed, Ethan said. And if it's the latter, and I didn't protect her, how do I live with that? You don't know she's innocent, and you don't know she's guilty, but you've already decided, just like the rest of the city. The revelation of how alone Ethan was in that decision came in the following days. Colleagues in the department began to avoid him. Not openly hostile, just distant, as if they were afraid of being associated. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors stopped waving. And online, Millbrook's social media exploded. Sheriff protects suspected murderer. Has Ethan Cross lost his mind? How can we trust him to protect us when he protects criminals? A petition began circulating, not to ban Grace from living in town, but to remove Ethan from his post. We demand that Sheriff Ethan Cross resign for improper conduct and impaired judgment. It gathered 300 signatures in 2 days, more than Sarah's petition against Grace. And Grace, watching from the window of Ethan's house as protesters occasionally appeared outside, felt overwhelming guilt. "You're losing everything for me," she said one night when they were sitting in the living room. Ethan was reviewing case files. Grace was pretending to read a book, but really just watching him. "I'm not losing anything worth keeping," he replied without looking up. "If friendships are conditional on me ignoring injustice, they weren't real friendships. If a career requires me to condemn the innocent to satisfy the mob, it's not a career I want." "But you don't know I'm innocent," Grace said, repeating the captain's words. "You're betting everything on belief. What if you're wrong?" Ethan finally looked up. "Then I'll be wrong, and I'll deal with the consequences. But Grace, I've seen you for 18 months. I've seen how you live. And I know I don't think, I know that you've changed. And a system that punishes change, that doesn't allow redemption, is not a system I want to serve." The bond between them, initially built on protector and protected, began to change during those nights. Because they spent hours together, they talked. Grace told him more about prison, about Dr. Chen and anger management classes, about learning that anger wasn't the enemy but a signal, about 3 years of learning to be different. Ethan told him about his sister, about how the system had failed her, about the guilt he carried for not having done more. "She tried to leave," he said, his voice heavy. "Her husband was violent, like Tyler was with you, and she called the police, and we came, and he convinced us it was a misunderstanding, and 2 days later, he killed her. It wasn't your fault," Grace said gently, "just as it's not your fault that Sarah died, but I've seen the system fail repeatedly, and if I can stop it from failing again with why will." There was something about shared vulnerability, about trauma, acknowledging trauma, and slowly, gradually, Grace began to see Ethan not as a distant authority figure, but as a person who had their own wounds, their own guilt, and who was choosing to do things differently this time. And Ethan began to see Grace not as a responsibility or a duty, but as a courageous person rebuilding her life brick by brick, despite the entire city trying to tear her down. But as their connection grew, so did the danger. Because the city wasn't satisfied with protests, and the Brennan family wasn't satisfied with waiting. And something was about to force Ethan to choose, follow public pressure or protect Grace, even at the cost of the badge that had defined him for 20 years. Now I want to delve even deeper into this matter. Because the days following Grace moving into Ethan's house didn't bring calm or a slackening of pressure. They brought escalation. Escalation of public anger, escalation of planted evidence, and escalation of real danger that made it clear that Ethan's protection might not be enough against an entire town determined to see Grace pay. The transformation from suspect to target began with the media. The local newspaper, the Millbrook Chronicle, published a front-page article with a photo of Grace, that same old booking photo that Sarah had used. Ex-convict suspected in fire death. The article didn't use the word alleged. It didn't use potential suspect. It simply stated it tenderly. Grace was a suspect, and the implication was clear. A news station in a neighboring county picked up the story. They sent a reporter to cover it. And the reporter, a young woman eager for a story that would generate views, didn't worry about nuance. Grace Holloway, who spent 3 years in prison for burning down her ex-boyfriend's house, is now the prime suspect in the death of Sarah Brennan's sister, of that same ex-boyfriend in a suspicious fire. The pattern of behavior is clear, and the Millbrook community is demanding justice. The clip aired on the evening news. It reached 50,000 people, and comments on the station's Facebook page were brutal. Arrest her before she burns down the whole town. Why was she released from prison? People like that don't change. They should be locked up forever. The narrative was being written in real time, and Grace had no voice, no platform, no way to tell her side of the story. Prosecutor Whitmore, seeing media coverage and public pressure, intensified his campaign to arrest Grace. He went straight to Captain Riley over Ethan's head. How long are we going to allow a murder suspect to walk free? How long until she does something else? She's not a flight risk, Riley argued, though without conviction. She has no resources, nowhere to go. It's not about flight, it's about justice. Sarah Brennan is dead. The family deserves to see someone answer for it. Someone guilty, Riley said. Not just someone convenient. But even Riley was feeling the pressure, because the mayor had called. The city council had expressed concerns, and his re-election as captain depended on not alienating the entire community. The impact of political pressure on the investigation was immediate. Riley called Ethan to the office. I need you to arrest Grace Holloway. Today. Based on what? Partial impressions and geographical proximity. Based on probable cause. She has a history. She had a motive. And evidence connects her. Circumstantial evidence that anyone could have planted. Ethan Riley sighed. He looked tired. Older than in the morning. I understand. You want to believe her. And I admire that. But I can't hold the whole city based on your instinct. Either you arrest her, or I'll have someone else do it. Then have someone else do it, Ethan said. Because I'm not going to arrest an innocent woman. You don't know she's innocent. And you don't know she's guilty. But that doesn't matter anymore, does it? The mob decided. And you're serving the mob, not justice. Riley could have fired Ethan right there. Technically, he had enough. Insubordination. But he didn't. Maybe because of 20 years of history. Maybe because part of him agreed. You have 48 hours, he finally said. 48 hours to find definitive evidence of her innocence. Or I'll have Deputy Carson arrest her. Understood? Understood. Ethan left, knowing his time was running out. 48 hours to prove Grace didn't do something. How do you prove negative? How do you prove someone wasn't in a specific place doing a specific thing when they have no alibi? He went home to find Grace sitting on the couch, watching news about her own case, seeing her face on the screen, listening to reporters speculate about a pattern of violence. Turn that off, Ethan said, grabbing the remote and turning off the TV. You don't need to torture yourself watching. But I need to know, Grace said, her voice small. I need to know what they're saying, how they see me. They see you wrong. And their opinion doesn't define you, but it defines what happens to me. If the jury sees me the way they see me, it won't go to trial if I can prevent it. Because you're innocent, and I'll prove it. But how? Ethan spent the night reviewing every detail of the case. Interviews with Sarah's neighbors. No one saw anything useful. I heard sirens. I saw smoke. But I didn't see who started the fire. Forensic analysis of the scene showed multiple ignition points. Professional, or at least someone who knew what they were doing. Like Grace would know. But also like anyone with internet access would know. Gasoline as an accelerant was no secret. The revelation came not from physical evidence, but from observation of behavior. Ethan was reviewing the timeline when he noticed something. Sarah died between 10 p.m. and 10:30 p.m., according to the medical examiner. Grace said she was at home watching TV, Law and Order, then the news at 11. Ethan checked the schedule for that night. Law and Order had indeed aired. 2 episodes, 9:11 p.m., and then local. News. If Grace had actually committed the crime between 10 to 10:30, she would have missed the end of the second episode and the beginning of the news. But when Ethan had asked what she watched, Grace had described specific details, including a news story about a local election. A small detail, but consistent with someone who was actually watching. Not definitive proof, but it suggested truth. Ethan also checked something else. Bus records. Grace didn't have a car. If she had gone to Sarah's house, 2 miles away, she would have had to walk or take the bus. Bus cameras showed Grace taking the bus back from the laundromat at 3:15 p.m., getting off at the stop near her apartment at 3:40 p.m., and then nothing. No footage of her leaving again. Sure, she could have walked, but that would have been a 40-minute walk. And in a small town where everyone knew everyone, someone would have seen her. Ethan interviewed the owner of the hardware store below Grace's apartment. Did you see Grace last night? No, but I heard her. Sound of TV through the ceiling. From 7 until midnight. sort of. Always the same routine. She doesn't go out much. The alibi wasn't perfect, but it was getting stronger. The problem was, Whitmore didn't care. To him, Grace was guilty, and any evidence would be interpreted to fit that conclusion. And then, the escalation happened. It happened on a Thursday night. Grace and Ethan were having dinner. Simple meal he had cooked when they heard it. Crash. Glass. Breaking. Grace's scream. Ethan stood up immediately, pulled his gun from his waist. Stay here. He ran into the living room. The window was broken. A brick lay across the carpet, and tied to the brick a note. Ethan picked it up, using a napkin preserving evidence. He read it. Block letters. Red ink that looked hand probably was meant to look like blood. Murderer. Get out, or burn like she burned. A clear threat. Direct. And when Ethan looked through the broken window, he saw figures running. 3, maybe 4 people, fleeing into the darkness. Grace appeared in the doorway. Pale face, trembling hands. They know where I am. They're going to. No one's going to hurt you, Ethan said, with more confidence than he felt. I'm here, and I won't let anything happen. But they both knew Ethan was a man, and out there was the whole city. A city that had decided Grace deserved punishment, and that was losing patience, waiting for the system to deliver. Ethan called the department, reported vandalism and threats. The deputy came, took photos, collected the brick and the note. I'll process this as evidence, and will increase patrols in this area. But his tone was reluctant, as if he were doing his duty but didn't agree with the protection being given. As if Grace deserved what she was getting. After deputy left, after Ethan covered the broken window with cardboard and tape, he found Grace sitting in her room. Not crying, just broken. I can't keep doing this to you, she said. When Ethan appeared in the doorway. Do what? Cost everything. Your house vandalized. Your reputation destroyed. Your career is over. All for me, and I'm not worth it. Let me decide what is, Ethan said, sitting on the edge of the bed. And you are, because you're innocent. And because the system is supposed to protect the innocent, not throw them to the wolves. But if I just leave, if I get out of Millbrook, maybe what? You run away forever. Live as a fugitive. Even though you're innocent. No, I won't let that happen. The emotional journey in that room, in that moment, was where the connection between them fundamentally shifted. Because Grace looked at Ethan, at the man who had sacrificed so much, and saw not just a protector. She saw someone who saw her, truly saw her. Not her past, not her crime, but the person she had become. And Ethan looked at Grace, at the woman who had survived so much. Hand saw not just responsibility, he saw courage, he saw strength. And he saw something more that he wasn't ready to name. Why are you doing this? Grace asked. A question she'd asked before, but this time with a different weight. Because it's the right thing to do, Ethan began. A standard answer. But he stopped. Because it wasn't just that. And because when I look at you, I see what the system should do, but rarely does. I see real redemption. I see change that cost everything. And if I turn my back on that, if I allow the city to destroy you, then everything I believe about justice is a lie. And Grace, hearing that, felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt seen, not judged, not diminished, but seen. And in that moment, in that small room with a broken window in the living room and a hostile city outside, something changed between them. It wasn't a sudden romance. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was a silent recognition that they were in this together, that the connection was real, and that no matter what came, they would face it side by side. Comment below when you finally find someone who sees you not the version everyone assumes, but the real person you've become. How can you not fall in love with that? Now, I want to delve even deeper into this matter, because Ethan's decision to shelter Grace in his own home wasn't just an act of protection. It was a public declaration that he was placing his belief in her innocence above everything else: career, reputation, relationships he had built over 20 years. And the cost of that choice didn't take long to arrive. It came quickly, it came brutally, and it came from all directions. The first call came from the mayor, Gerald Morrison, a man Ethan had known for 15 years, who had supported his campaign for sheriff, who had been at Ethan's sister's wedding. "Ethan, I need you to understand the gravity of the situation. You are harboring a murder suspect in your home. This isn't just reckless. It's scandalous. I'm protecting a civilian threatened by vigilantism," Ethan replied, maintaining a firm voice even though he felt the weight of each word. "It's literally my job. Your job is to arrest criminals, not protect them. Grace hasn't been convicted, not even formally charged. She's a person of interest. There's a difference the public doesn't understand. And honestly, Ethan, a difference I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Do you know her personally? Is there something between you two?" The implication was clear and insulting. There's nothing more to it than a law enforcement officer doing his job, protecting the innocent until proven guilty. "If she is innocent," the mayor said, "but the evidence suggests otherwise. And the community is furious. I've been getting calls, emails, people demanding her removal." The transformation from respected sheriff to controversial figure happened overnight. Literally, the morning after Grace moved in, Millbrook's social media exploded, post after post, comment after comment. "Ethan Cross has completely lost his mind. How can we trust a sheriff who protects murderers? He's clearly involved with her. Why else would he do that?" Petition to remove Cross from office. Sign and share. And people signed. Ethan's colleagues in the department, people he had known at church, neighbors who had been friendly. In 48 hours, the petition had 370 signatures. In a town of 3,000, that was more than 10%. It was a number that couldn't be ignored. But worse than public pressure was pressure from within the department. Deputies whom Ethan had trained, whom he had mentored, began to avoid him. Not openly hostile, just distant, as if association with him was contagious. Deputy Marcus Carsona, man in his 30s, whom Ethan considered a friend, was more direct. He pulled Ethan aside for a private conversation. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it, but I'll be honest because I respect you. Tell me, I think you're wrong. I think Grace is guilty, and I think you're being manipulated. I don't know if it's because you feel guilt about her trial years ago, or if there's something more. But you're jeopardizing everything for a woman who probably burned someone else alive." The impact of those words from someone Ethan respected was more painful than criticism from strangers. "Did you investigate?" Ethan asked. "Did you look at the evidence? Objectively, or did you just assume guilt based on her history?" "I saw enough evidence. Fingerprints, motive, opportunity, circumstantial evidence, the kind anyone could plant, or evidence that points to obvious suspicion. Sometimes the simplest answer is right, and the simple answer is, ex-convict with a history of arson did it again." "What if I'm wrong?" Ethan asked. "What if she's innocent and we convict her because it's convenient? Then I'm wrong. But Ethan, what if you're wrong? What if she's guilty and you sacrificed everything for nothing?" It was a question Ethan had asked himself. On sleepless nights, when doubt creeped in, what if he was wrong? What if Grace was guilty and he was being an idiot? But then he remembered. He remembered 18 months of observation. He remembered Grace meeting Tyler and walking away. He remembered every piece of evidence of real change, and he knew. He didn't think. He knew. Grace didn't do it. And if no one else would defend her, he would, even if it cost him everything. Ethan's journey from respected figure to social outcast was publicly documented. The local newspaper ran an editorial. Sheriff Cross compromised the integrity of his office by harboring prime suspect. Regardless of his intentions, the appearance of impropriety undermines public trust. We call for his resignation. Resignation. A word Ethan never thought he'd hear, directed at him. He'd been sheriff for 5 years, elected with 62% of the vote, considered fair, competent, dedicated, and now, for doing what he believed was right, he was being asked to resign. Friends stopped replying to messages. Invitations to events were quietly withdrawn. And on the street, as Ethan walked, people who used to greet him now avoided eye contact. Or worse, they looked at him with something between pity and disgust, as if he had betrayed everyone. There was a specific moment that crystallized the cost for Ethan. He was in a supermarket buying groceries when he saw Sarah Thompson, a woman who had been a friend of Ethan's deceased sister, a woman who had cried at the funeral, who had said, "If you need anything, anything at all, I'm here." Ethan nodded. Sarah turned, literally turned, and went down another hallway, as if he were invisible, as if 20 years of history had been erased because he made a choice she didn't approve of. Ethan stood there, holding a shopping basket, feeling profound loneliness, because it wasn't just about disagreement. It was about abandonment. It was about the community he had served for 2 decades, deciding he was no longer welcome. All because he chose to protect someone the city wanted to destroy. And the worst part, Grace saw it all, saw the cost Ethan was paying, and felt overwhelming guilt. "You need to lock me up," she said one night. They were sitting in the living room, Ethan reviewing files, Grace pretending to read but really just watching the destruction of his life. "What? You need to arrest me. Officially, prosecute me. Do what the city wants. Because this is destroying you. And it's not worth it. I'm not worth it." Ethan put files aside. He looked directly at her. "Let me ask you something. Did you do this? Did you kill Sarah?" "No, I swear I didn't." "Then I won't arrest you. I won't condemn an innocent person to satisfy the mob, no matter the cost. But the cost is your career, your life, everything. My career means nothing if it's based on compromising principles. My life had become comfortable, but comfort based on not making waves, on not challenging injustice. That's not the life I want." His voice was firm, determined, but Grace saw something more. She saw pain. She saw real cost. The revelation of how deep the cost would be came when Captain Riley called Ethan back into his office. City Council voted. They want you suspended. Pending investigation into misconduct. Investigation into what? Doing my job. Into harboring suspicion. Into potentially compromising the investigation. Riley stopped. He looked exhausted. "Ethan, I'm trying to protect you here, but you're not helping me. If you would turn Grace in, if you would let Carson arrest her, all of this would be gone, and she would go to prison. Innocent. You don't know she's innocent." Riley exploded, finally losing the patience he had maintained. "You believe, but belief isn't fact. And mob conviction isn't justice," Ethan retorted. "But that's what you're serving. You're allowing public pressure to dictate the investigation. You're allowing bias against Grace to replace real evidence. Then show me the evidence. Show me something, anything that definitively proves she didn't do it. I can't prove a negative. I don't have to. The burden of proof is on the prosecution to prove guilt. And they don't have it. Not beyond a reasonable doubt, but they have enough to prosecute her. And if you don't turn her in, I'll have Carson come get her. And you'll be suspended, without pay, while we investigate your actions." It was an ultimatum, final, and Ethan knew he had no more choices. "Then suspend me," he said, "because I'm not going to hand over an innocent woman to the mob. She's not innocent, Ethan. Why can't you see that? Because I've seen 18 months of real change. Because I know the difference between who someone was and who they've become. And because if we condemn people for their past without allowing redemption, then the whole system is a lie." Riley was silent for a long moment, and then, badge and gun. Now, the moment of handing over the badge, the piece of metal that had defined Ethan for 20 years, was surreal. He unbuckled it from his belt, placed it on the table, along with his service weapon, and felt, not relief, But not devastation either. He felt clarity. Because now it wasn't about protocol or politics anymore. It was just about protecting Grace. As a man. Not as sheriff. "You're making a mistake," Riley said as Ethan turned to leave. "Maybe," Ethan replied. "But it's a mistake I can live with. And that's more than I could say if I turned her in." He went home. To Grace, who was waiting, knowing from his face what had happened. "They suspended you." "Yes, because of me. By my choice." And Grace, looking at the man who had lost the badge he loved for defending her, felt something break and reform at the same time, because no one had ever sacrificed for her. No one had ever chosen her over convenience. And now Ethan had lost his career. He had lost the respect of his community. He had lost everything. And yet he was still there. Still between her and danger. Not because he had to be, but because he chose to be. And that choice meant more than words could express. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the days following Ethan's suspension were when the true nature of the relationship between him and Grace began to reveal itself. Wasn't sudden romance or dramatic attraction. It was something slower, deeper, built on shared vulnerability, and the recognition that they had both been broken by systems that were supposed to protect them. And that now, isolated from the entire city, they only had each other. The first few days after Ethan handed in his badge were strange. He was home during the day 4, the first time in 20 years he had nowhere to go. He had no job. He had no routine. He just existed. And Grace, who had lived exactly that kind of limited existence for 18 months, recognized it immediately. She tried to give him space. She stayed in her room whenever she could. She didn't want to be more of a burden than she already was, but Ethan wouldn't allow it. "You don't need to hide," he said one morning when he found Grace waiting in her room until he left the kitchen. "This is your home too, temporarily. But while you're here, you don't need to live like a ghost. But you lost everything for me. The least I can do is not be in the way." "Grace," he stopped at her bedroom door. "You're not in the way. And I haven't lost everything. I've lost a badge. I've lost the approval of people who, honestly, maybe never really knew me. But I haven't lost what matters. What matters? A clear conscience. The certainty that I did the right thing. And," he hesitated, "in connection with someone who understands what it means to be judged unfairly." Their dynamic shift began there. Because Grace stopped hiding, she started taking up space. And Ethan started talking. Not about the case, not about the investigation, but about himself. About things he hadn't talked to anyone about in years. About his sister. They were having breakfast. Ethan had made pancakes, a culinary surprise Grace hadn't expected when he began. "My sister's name was Becky, 2 years younger than me, and all her life, I tried to protect her. From the bullies at school, from bad boyfriends, from anything that could hurt her." He paused, stirring his coffee, though he hadn't added anything. And then she met Daniel. And at first, he seemed great, charming, attentive, the kind of guy parents approve of. But it wasn't, Grace said gently. Not a question, a statement. Because she recognized the story. It wasn't. The abuse started small. Criticism, isolation from friends. And when Becky tried to ask for help, I saw the signs. But Daniel was convincing. He said Becky was exaggerating, that she had emotional problems. And part of me, God forgive me, part of me believed him. The impact of that admission that he had failed his sister just as the system had failed Grace was visible on his face. She called the police 5 times, just like you. And every time, Daniel convinced her it was a misunderstanding, that Becky was unstable, and I was a police officer. I should have seen it. I should have forced action, but I didn't. Grace reached across the table. She took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact. It wasn't your fault. She tried to leave. She finally mustered the courage, and I helped. I helped her get a restraining order. I found an apartment for her. I thought she was safe. His voice broke, and 2 days before the order was finalized, Daniel broke into the apartment and killed her, stabbed her 23 times. And when I found her body, he couldn't finish. He didn't need to. Grace squeezed his hand. How long has it been? 7 years. And since then, I've carried the guilt of not having done more, of not having fully believed her, of having been part of a system that failed. The revelation that Ethan's trauma mirrored Grace's trauma created an understanding that words couldn't, because Grace knew exactly what it was like to not be believed. She knew what it was like for the system to fail, and she knew the weight of living with the consequences. That's why you defend me, she said. Not accusation, understanding. Because you see your sister in me. No, Ethan said, looking directly at her. Initially, maybe, but not anymore. Now I defend you because you are Grace, because I saw who you became, and because you deserve a chance that Becky never had. A chance to live without being defined by the worst moment. A chance to prove that change is real. And Grace, hearing that, felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She felt hope. Not just hope of being exonerated, but hope of being seen, of being known, of being valued not despite the past, but including the past and everything that came after. In the following days, the conversations deepened. Grace told more about Tyler, about how the abuse had begun. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward, said he was a monster, that he would never do it again. And I believed him, because I wanted to believe him, because I was invested, because I thought I could fix him. She laughed bitterly. Classic victim mentality, right? Thinking that love can cure violence. It's not weakness to believe in the best of people, Ethan said. It's humanity. And Tyler used that against you. For 18 months. And every time I tried to ask for help, every time I called the police, he convinced everyone. Because he was good at it. Because he knew exactly what to say. And eventually I stopped calling. Because what was the point? So you reacted the only way you knew how. I burned his house down. I destroyed the thing he valued most, property. And it felt, God, it felt good in that moment. It felt like power, like control, like finally doing something instead of just taking. Grace looked at her hands. And then I spent 3 years paying for it, and another 1.5 years being reminded. And now someone's dead and everyone assumes it was me. Because once a destroyer, always a destroyer. No matter how much I've changed. But you've changed, Ethan said. I saw it when Tyler confronted you at that diner and you walked away. When Sarah harassed you and you didn't fight back. When the whole town rejected you and you kept showing up, kept working, kept proving yourself. Their emotional journey continued in small moments. Grace started cooking something she hadn't done in years, because cooking for someone seemed pointless. But cooking for Ethan, it felt different. It felt like care. It felt like a way of giving back when she had nothing left to give. Ethan began sharing their morning routine. They woke up around the same time. They made coffee together. They sat on the porch when the weather permitted. They talked about things that had nothing to do with their affair, about books they liked, about movies, about what it would be like to live in a place where no one knew their past. If you could go anywhere, Ethan asked one morning, where would it be? Grace thought, mountains, maybe Colorado, a place where I could see the horizon, where the air is clean and people don't know my name. Why don't you go? Because running away feels like admitting guilt. It feels like saying Sarah and the city were right, and I can't do that. I can't let the past win again. And Ethan, hearing that, saw not just a survivor. He saw a fighter. He saw someone refusing to give up, even when giving up would be easier. And he felt something change within him. Something that began as duty, that evolved into respect, that was now becoming something more. Something that frightened him because it was profound. Because it was real, in a way that few relationships were. There was a night when Grace had a nightmare. Ethan heard a scream. He ran to her room. He found her sitting on the bed, trembling, sweat covering her face. I'm sorry. No need to apologize, Ethan said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Nightmare. About fire. About Sarah. About being arrested, and no one believing me, and spending the rest of my life in prison for something I didn't do. Her voice broke. And the worst part is, part of me thinks maybe I deserve it, not because of Sarah, but because of what I did before. Maybe this is karma. Maybe the system is just correcting the mistake of not keeping me locked up longer the first time. No, Ethan said firmly. No, you paid for the crime you committed, completely. The system has no right to punish you again for a different crime you didn't commit. And Grace, he took her hand. You don't deserve this. Nobody deserves this. And we're going to prove your innocence. I promise. How can you promise that? You're not even sheriff anymore. You have no power. You have no resources. I have brains. I have 20 years of experience. And I have motivation I didn't have in any case before. What motivation? Grace asked, looking at him through tears. Ethan hesitated, because an honest answer was big. It was an admission of something he wasn't sure he wanted to say yet, but it was. Also true. You, he said simply, you are motivation. Because I knew you, and I saw you. And I'm not going to let the system destroy you again. And Grace, hearing that, seeing sincerity in his eyes, felt something she had sworn never to feel again. She felt the beginning of love. Not dramatic love or explosive passion, but the kind of love that grows in trenches, that is forged in adversity, that recognizes in another person a spirit equally broken and equally determined to continue. And it was frightening, because to love meant vulnerability. It meant risk. It meant that Grace had something to lose besides freedom, but it also meant hope. Hope that perhaps, just perhaps, on the other side of the nightmare she was living, there was a possibility of something good, something real, something worth fighting for. Comment below. When love grows, not in perfect moments, but in darker times, when it's built on shared trauma and mutual protection, does that make it stronger or more fragile? Now, I want to delve even deeper into this matter, because the resolution of Grace's innocence didn't come through the system that should have protected her. It came through Ethan no badge, no official authority, no resources, refusing to give up. And it came through truth that had been hidden in plain sight, ignored because the city was so focused on convicting Grace that it didn't look at anyone else. Ethan had begun an independent investigation the day after the suspension. Without access to departmental resources, without the ability to officially interview, he worked behind the scenes. He started with a basic question that no one else had asked: who benefited from Sarah's death? The obvious answer was Grace revenge for Sarah's campaign. But Ethan dug deeper. He investigated Sarah's finances. He discovered that she co-owned family property with her cousin, Marcus Brennan. Marcus, 37 years old, had a history of financial problems, 2 bankruptcies, multiple unpaid loans, and significant debt to the wrong people, the kind of people who don't tolerate late payments. Ethan discovered this through public records and discreet conversations with people who weren't entirely against him. Sarah and Marcus had inherited property from their grandmother, a large house in the historic center of Millbrook worth approximately $400,000. Marcus wanted to sell. He desperately needed the money, but Sarah refused. She wanted to keep the property in the family, and as a co-owner, she had veto power. Marcus couldn't sell without her consent. The transformation from vague possibility to real suspicion happened when Ethan discovered that Marcus had done online research on how to force the sale of co-owned property and what happens to shared property when a co-owner dies. Research dated back 3 weeks before the fire. Not proof, but worrying. Ethan also discovered that Marcus had bought gasoline 5 gallons 2 days before the fire. The receipt showed a purchase at a gas station outside of town. When casually confronted, Marcus said it was for his lawnmower. But Ethan checked. Marcus lived in an apartment. No lawn, no need for gasoline, for garden equipment. Pieces were falling into place, but Ethan needed more. He needed something definitive. So he did something risky. He went directly to Marcus. No badge, no authority, just as a citizen asking questions. He found Marcus at a local bar. "May I sit down?" Marcus looked up. He recognized Ethan and laughed. "Ex-sheriff, protecting murderess." "Sure, sit down. Let's talk about how you destroyed reputations." "Let's talk about Sarah," Ethan said, ignoring the provocation. "About the property you shared." "What about that?" "About how you desperately needed money. About how Sarah refused to sell. About how her death solves the problem." Marcus tensed. "Are you accusing me? You don't have a badge. You don't have authority. So be careful what you say. I'm not accusing. I'm observing. Observing that you had a motive. Observing that you bought gasoline days before the fire. Observing that you researched the deaths of Connors." Marcus's expression changed. From disdain to concern. "You investigated me. I did my job. What the department should have done if it wasn't focused on convenient suspicion. Grace is guilty. Everyone knows. Everyone assumes. There's a difference." The impact of the conversation was immediate. Marcus became defensive, aggressive, and Ethan, with years of interrogation experience, saw it. Saw guilt. Saw fear. Saw a man hiding something. "You planted evidence," Ethan said. "Not a question. A statement. Gasoline can. Fingerprints. You knew the city would instantly believe Grace did it, so you used her history." "You're crazy," Marcus said, but his voice trembled. "Sarah died in the fire you started. To inherit property alone, to pay debts, and you framed an innocent woman because it was convenient." "I can't hear this." Marcus stood up. "Get out. Now. Not until you admit the truth." "I have nothing to admit." Marcus was shouting now. "People in the bar watching, and even if I did, you're not a cop. You can't do anything." But Ethan had recorded the conversation. A phone in his pocket capturing everything. Not legal to use in court without consent, but enough to take to Deputy Carson, who was still investigating the case. Ethan met with Carson the next day. "I need you to listen to something." He played the recording. Carson listened with an increasingly serious expression. "Where did you get this?" "A conversation with Marcus Brennan. Yesterday, Ethan. You can't. You don't have the authority to interrogate suspects." "I didn't interrogate him. I spoke to him. As a citizen. And he revealed himself. It's still not admissible. But it's enough for probable cause. To investigate him properly. To stop focusing only on Grace, and look at the person who really benefits. The journey from resistance to a real investigation took time." Carson didn't want to admit that the department had erred, that it had focused on Grace out of bias, not evidence, but the recording planted a seed. And Carson, to his credit, followed through. He investigated Marcus's, and discovered more. He discovered that Marcus had an insurance policy on the property, a policy that would pay out if the property was destroyed. He discovered that Marcus had changed the policy just months before the fire, increasing coverage. He discovered a more extensive search history, including how to create a fire that looks accidental, and fingerprint transfer. And when confronted with the mounting evidence, when Carson pressed with threats of formal charges, Marcus broke. Not immediately, but gradually. "I didn't want to hurt her," he finally said. I needed the money, and Sarah was being stubborn. I didn't understand desperation. So you killed her. It was an accident. Fire shouldn't spread so fast. She should have gotten out, but she didn't get out in time. And you framed Grace." Marcus looked down. "Everyone already thought it was her. I just made it obvious. I took a gasoline can I'd used, found her fingerprints on a disposable cup sheet, touched it at the market. I transferred them using tape. I left the can where it would be found. The city would take care of the rest. They already hated her. They already wanted her guilty. So you destroyed an innocent woman's life to cover up murder. She was already destroyed. She was already an ex-convict. Nobody would believe her anyway. So what difference did it make? The revelation of that logic that Grace was an acceptable sacrifice because she was already marginalized was shocking in its casual cruelty, but also true to how society viewed people like Grace as disposable. Marcus was arrested, formally charged with murder and framing an innocent person, and Grace was exonerated, officially, publicly. Prosecutor Whitmore made a statement. After further investigation, we have determined that Grace Holloway had no involvement in the death of Sarah Brennan. All potential charges against her are dropped. No apology. No acknowledgement that the department had targeted her based on bias. Just a clinical declaration of innocence. As if that erased the damage. The media covered the reversal. Cousin arrested for Sarah Brennan's death. Grace Holloway exonerated. But the articles didn't mention months of torment. They didn't mention the brick thrown through the window. They didn't mention how the city had turned against her without evidence. They only reported the bare facts. And Millbrook remained silent. There were no public apologies. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a quiet acceptance that they had been wrong. Again, people who had posted about Grace online deleted their posts. People who had signed a petition against her didn't acknowledge it. And Grace, now free to return to her apartment, to rebuild, discovered that exoneration didn't erase the damage. Her reputation was still tarnished. Trust was still broken. And the scars of being hunted by the entire community were still fresh. The laundromat didn't want her back. Sorry, Grace, but association with the case. Customers are uncomfortable. Translation: they still see her as a problem. The apartment above the hardware store was rented to someone else while she was away. We thought you wouldn't come back. And friendships. There were no friendships to rebuild. Because Grace never had any. She was alone as she always had been. Except she wasn't. Because she had Ethan. Ethan, who was also facing his own journey of reintegration. Captain Riley offered her badge back. Investigation into conduct is closed. You were right, and the department was wrong. Go back. But Ethan hesitated. Because going back meant working for a system that had failed Grace so completely. It meant serving a city that had condemned her without evidence. It meant pretending nothing had changed when everything had. I need time, he said, to think. And while he thought, Grace stayed. Not because she had nowhere to go, though that was true, but because she didn't want to go. Because Ethan's house had become something her apartment never was. Home. And Ethan didn't want her to go. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the week after Marcus's arrest was when Grace and Ethan faced a truth they had avoided during the crisis. What happened now? When the immediate danger had passed. When exoneration was complete. When there was no longer any practical reason for Grace to stay, except there was. A reason that had nothing to do with safety or convenience, and everything to do with what had grown between them in months of shared struggle. Grace woke up on a Tuesday, 7 days after Marcus was arrested, and made a decision. She had to go, not because she wanted to, but because staying seemed unfair. Unfair to Ethan, who had already sacrificed so much. Unfair to herself, to stay in a city that would never accept her. So she started packing. The same small bag I had brought. The few clothes she owned. The book I was reading. Everything fitting easily, because her whole life fit into one suitcase. Ethan found her in the guest room. He saw an open suitcase on the bed. He saw Grace carefully folding a shirt, and he felt something tighten in his chest. Something he had tried to ignore but couldn't anymore. You're leaving. Not a question. A statement. Grace stopped. Didn't turn around. Yes, I think it's time. Where to? I don't know yet. Maybe Colorado. Maybe just far away. A place where nobody knows my name. where I can start over without the past following me. She finally turned around, and Ethan saw tears in her eyes. I can't stay here, Ethan. Even if I'm exonerated, even if Marcus is in jail, I'm still that woman. I always will be. And the next time something goes wrong, the next time there's a fire or a crime is committed, guess who they'll look to first? The transformation on Ethan's face went from understanding to something more, something like panic, because he realized he was about to lose Grace, and losing her now, after everything, seemed unthinkable. I understand, he said. I really understand. But Grace. He entered the room. He stood a few steps from her. What if you weren't alone? Grace froze. What? What if you didn't have to face a new beginning alone? What if there was a reason to stay? Ethan, you don't have to. I'm not offering out of pity or obligation, he interrupted. I'm offering because in the last few months, living with you, getting to know you, seeing who you really are, it changed something in me. It changed everything in me. The impact of those words made Grace sit on the edge of the bed. You lost your badge for me. You lost the city's respect. You sacrificed your entire career, and now that it's over, now that you don't need to protect me anymore, you can have your life back. You can rebuild. But you can't do that if I'm here. I'll always be a reminder. Always a controversy. Do you think I want my life back as it was? Ethan asked, sitting beside her. A life where you followed rules that allowed injustice. Where comfortable meant not making waves. Where a badge mattered more than conscience. I don't want that life, Grace. Because I met you. And you showed me what really matters, Ethan. The next sheriff election is in 6 months, he continued. And honestly, I'll probably lose. The city doesn't forget. It doesn't forget that I defended a former prisoner against their will. Some will vote for me on principle, but the majority sees me as a traitor. So why run? Why not just leave too? Start somewhere else where you can be sheriff again. Because Millbrook needs a sheriff who doesn't serve the mob, who serves justice. And if I lose, if the town decides it doesn't want me, then I'll go. But at least I will have tried to do things differently. He turned to look directly at her. But Grace, if you go, if you leave Millbrook, I want to go with you. Not because you need protection, but because I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. Grace felt her breath catch. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you better than most people I've known in my entire life. I've seen you under extreme pressure. I've seen you when the whole town turned against you. I've seen you maintain your integrity when it would have been easier to give up. I've seen you, the real you, and that's more than most relationships have after years. The revelation that Ethan wasn't offering protection but partnership, not shelter but a shared life, was devastating. You're saying you love me, Grace said, almost a whisper, because saying it aloud made it real. Made it terrifying. Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm saying exactly that. I love you. Not in a dramatic movie way, but in the solid way of someone who's seen you at your worst and your best and wants to be there for all the moments in between. I love you, Grace Holloway, ex-convict, survivor, the bravest person I know. Grace began to cry. Not sadness, confusion. Because part of her wanted to believe, wanted to accept, but another part, the part that had been hurt and rejected and condemned, couldn't process that someone would choose her, really. Choose her. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to be loved, how to trust, how to build something when I've spent so much time just surviving. Then we learned together, Ethan said, taking her hands. I don't know either. I haven't had a serious relationship since Rebecca died. Because I carried guilt. Because I prioritized work. Because it was easier to be alone than to take a risk. But you're worth the risk. What if it doesn't work out? What if we stay together and eventually you realize I'm too much baggage? That the past weighs too heavily? Then we deal with it. Like adults. Like partners. But Grace, If you leave now, if you go away without even trying, we'll spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. And I don't want that. I want to try, even if it's hard. Even if the city judges. Even if we don't know how it will be. Grace's journey from doubt to consideration happened in that silence. Because she thought about what Ethan was offering, not just love, but home. Not just a relationship, but belonging. Something she had never had. Not before Tyler. Not during prison. Not in the 18 months after her release. She had always been alone. She had always been an outsider. And now Ethan was offering her a chance to be part of something. To have someone. To build a life that wasn't just about survival, but truly living. But what about the city? She asked. If we stay together, they'll talk, they'll judge. They'll say, "You're making a mistake." Let them talk. They already do. And honestly, opinions from people who condemned you without evidence, who harassed you, who refused to apologize even now. Those opinions mean nothing to me, and your badge. What if you run again, and they don't elect you because of me? Then they won't elect me, and I'll find another job. Maybe private security, maybe investigation, or maybe we'll go, together, to Colorado, or wherever you want. The point is, you're not an obstacle to the life I want. You are the life I want. And Grace, hearing that, felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She allowed herself to wait. She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this. She deserved love. She deserved a second chance, not only in freedom, but in happiness. "I love you too," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I don't know when it started. Maybe when you believed in me when no one else did. Maybe when you lost your badge and still stayed. Maybe when you held my hand in that nightmare and didn't make me feel weak. But I love you, and it terrifies me. Why? Because love has always hurt me before. Tyler said he loved me while he beat me. Parents said they loved me but didn't believe me when I needed help. Love always came with conditions. It always came with a price. And I don't know how to trust that your love is different. It's different because it doesn't come with conditions," Ethan said. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm not asking you to pretend to be someone you're not. I'm asking you to stay, to try, to build with me. And if there are bad days we'll deal with them, together. And what if the city never accepts us? What if we're always outcasts? Then we're outcasts together. And honestly, I'd rather be an outcast with you than respected without you." And Grace, hearing that, made a decision that would change everything. The decision to stay, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she chose to. She chose Ethan. She chose the possibility of real love. She chose to fight for life here instead of running towards uncertainty there. "Okay," she said, "I'll stay. But Ethan, if we're going to stay together, if we're going to try this, we need to do it right. We need to give ourselves a real chance. Not just living together because it's convenient, but really building something." "I totally agree. What do you want?" "I want to date you. Really. I want dinners and conversations and discovering each other outside of crisis. I want time to heal, to process. And then, if it still works, if it still makes sense, we'll see what comes next." "It seems perfect," Ethan said. And for the first time in months, he smiled. A real smile, not relief from past danger, but happiness at the possibility of a future. And Grace smiled back. She smiled because for the first time in 6 years, she had something to look forward to. Not just the absence of pain, but the presence of joy. The presence of love. The presence of the person who chose her. But as they sat there, as they planned for the future, they didn't know that elsewhere in Millbrook, in a prison cell, Marcus Brennan was being interviewed by a detective, and he was revealing something that would change everything again. "Want a deal?" Marcus said. "I have information. About another crime. About Grace Holloway. A crime she actually committed. but nobody ever found out. And this is where Grace and Ethan's story ends for now. Not because it's over. Stories like this never end cleanly and perfectly. They continue, they evolve, they face new challenges. And Grace and Ethan, they decided to stay. They decided to fight. They decided that love built in trenches, love tested by pressure that would break most people, was love worth protecting. Grace didn't pack her bags. She didn't run away to Colorado or any other anonymous place. She stayed in Millbrook, not because the town deserved a chance, but because she deserved a chance to prove she could build a life in a place that had tried to destroy her. And because Ethan was by her side. Ethan decided to run for sheriff again in the next election. Not because he was sure he would win. In fact, the odds were against him. But because the principles he had defended, the justice he had fought for, were worth fighting for again. And what if the city decided it didn't want him? Then he and Grace would go together, somewhere new, to start where a badge didn't define who he was. Marcus Brennan is awaiting trial, and his claim about Grace's another crime. Preliminary investigation showed it was a lie. A desperate attempt to negotiate a plea deal by fabricating guilt where there was none. Because people like Marcus don't understand redemption. They don't understand that someone can truly change. So they assume everyone hides crimes. Everyone has secrets. But Grace doesn't. Not anymore. She paid for the mistakes she made. And you're not going to pay again. As for Millbrook, the town didn't change overnight. People still whisper when Grace walks by. They still avoid eye contact. But some have begun to see things differently. They've begun to question their own judgment. They've begun to realize they condemned an innocent woman based on prejudice. And though they don't apologize aloud, small actions say something. The owner of the hardware store offered Grace's old apartment back, if you want it. No deposit this time, just if you want it. Grace thanked him, but refused, because she didn't need it anymore. She had a home, with Ethan, building something new, something that was theirs. If this kind of story resonates with you, if you want to keep following stories about people fighting for a second chance when the system fails, about love that grows in adversity, about choosing integrity when cost is everything, subscribing here is the way to continue walking with me. Because every week I bring stories like this, stories about real redemption, about protection that is not possession but respect, about justice that sometimes needs to be fought outside the system, about love that is built brick by brick amidst chaos. Comment below. I'm with you until the end. I read every comment, every word, and I want to know if Grace and Ethan resonated with you. If you felt anger when the city condemned her without evidence, if you felt relief when Ethan believed, if you believe that people can change, that the past doesn't have to define the future, that true love is the kind that remains when everyone else leaves. And if this touched you in any way, if at any point you felt the weight of being judged for who you used to be instead of who you've become, or if you've ever sacrificed something important to do the right thing even when no one else was watching, leave a like so I know, because these stories are about connection. And like me and tell me what you felt. What journey of graces, from condemned to vindicated, from alone to loved, resonated with something real in you. There's a video over here that continues in the same vein. Another story about a woman fighting against a city that decided who she is. About a sheriff who has to choose between career and conscience. About love growing when everything else is crumbling. Click and follow me there. Because the journey doesn't stop. Characters change. Scenarios change. But the truth at the center remains. That redemption is possible when someone believes. That justice is worth fighting for, even when the system fails. And that the strongest love is the one tested by fire and chooses to stay. See you soon.